Okay, hello everyone. I have just after 1 o'clock on my watch, and so I think we're going to get started. I want to thank all of you for coming. Really appreciate it. I think we are in for a treat. Today's topic is library data for advocacy, and we're very lucky to have Amy Stefanski from Dunlap CUSD 323. Amy's the district librarian, and she's going to talk about how she uses her school library data to advocate for her library. And then we're also going to have an opportunity for everyone to participate and talk about how they use data in their own libraries and with their own communities. So this is part of the My Library Is campaign, and we're excited to offer this as an option for our members. My name is Dan Bostrom, and I'm the Rails Member Engagement Manager. This is the second online roundtable we've done in 2020. We did one in January on managing the marketing process, and we have one coming up, and I'll mention that in a little bit. If you've never participated in this type of format, it's a little bit different. It's peer-to-peer learning. Amy's going to do a short presentation, but we're also going to have some time to ask questions, and there's going to be some discussion questions put onto the message board. So I hope you'll get familiar with that and be willing to use it so that we can hear from you about what you're doing. Okay, so this is how we're going to operate today. I'm going to do a quick introduction of some things that are happening around Rails, and then we're going to do Amy's presentation. And then we'll do our text discussion, and then I'll come back and kind of wrap it up and conclude. So I do want to offer you again the opportunity to sort of introduce yourself and tell us who you are. So in that chat, on your toolbar, you'll see that there's a chat option, and I noticed a couple of you have already used it, so that's great. When you open the chat box, make sure you choose the all attendees and panelists option so that everyone can see your message. Otherwise, it just goes to me and Amy, and although we love to see it, we're hoping that everybody will participate by sharing widely. Okay, some news and opportunities from Rails. A couple things I want to mention here. This is a webinar that's coming up tomorrow, and it's also part of the My Library Is campaign. Sorry, I said tomorrow, I meant next week. Tuesday, March 10th, 1:30 to 3 o'clock. A librarian's crash course in marketing, the beginner's guide to promoting your collection at events. We are really taking this issue on pretty hard. Marketing in libraries is a big thing for us right now. Angela Hirsch runs superlibrarymarketing.com, and she's the former content team leader at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I think she's got a lot of great ideas. Her blog is fantastic. She has done a lot of presentations on this topic before, and we're really lucky to have her. So I am actually going to attend this myself, and I hope you will as well. Make sure to register via L2. There's another one coming up in 2 weeks. And so if you love today's presentation, why not experience the 60-minute version? Amy Stefanski, our presenter today, is going to be doing a full webinar for us on March 17th from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Her topic is making it count, leveraging data in the library. And I have to admit that I've seen Amy talk before. I saw her presentation at the IL conference last year. And you're going to get a dose of it today, but it's really not it's something you want to miss. She's got a lot of unique tips and suggestions on how any library can capture and utilize data. So be sure to sign up for that. Something else that's going on around Rails, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. On Library Lovers Day, which was also Valentine's Day, we released a new video, and we're super excited about it. This was a partnership with Imagination Creative Agency. It's called The Elders of the Internet, and it stars Nick Offerman from Parks and Recreation, aka the Wizard of the World Wide Web. So this video lives on our My Library Is site, www.mylibraryis.org. You can check out the video there. There's also a quiz you can take. And we just published 25 ways to promote this video at your own library. So that's a kind of a cool thing. We would love your help in spreading the news about this video. So, get it to your teachers, students, community members, board members, whoever. There's also, we've also encouraged people to send it to your legislators and, folks who might represent your particular area of Illinois. So please do check that out. We're really excited about it. Another opportunity that we have with the My Library is campaign is we have a grant. You can apply for up to $5,000 for any campaign or project that will tell your library story. So I put a few examples in there. Last fall, we had a few libraries work together to apply for funds. They are working with a consultant to develop some marketing templates. And we also had a few libraries apply for funds to create a video promoting their programs and services. I thought that was really cool. So you can apply either by yourself as a library or with other partner libraries. Applications are due Friday, April 24th, so please keep that in mind. We have another upcoming online roundtable on a very similar topic, solo library marketing. If you can't get enough of online roundtables, we've definitely got more for you in store. Thursday, May 14th, 1 to 2 p.m. The presenter is Emily Glimko from the Addison Public Library. She's going to talk about how to manage library marketing when you're the only person doing library marketing at your institution. She's a team of one at the Addison Public Library, and she does a fantastic job. So for you smaller libraries, this is going to be a really great sharing opportunity and a way to kind of share what you're doing and hear some ideas about what other libraries might be doing. Registration is open through that, and you can register through L2. Okay, so I'm done talking, and I am going to give Amy the control here in a second. Okay, so Amy Stefanski is the district librarian at Dunlap CUSD 323. And hold on one second, Amy. All right. Okay, did you get it, Amy?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's see if this works. Oh, my computer is doing something strange. Oh, there we go. All right, so thank you everybody for coming today. I know that 1 to 2 o'clock is right in the middle of all of our days, so I really appreciate you guys taking the time out to come visit today for the roundtable. I'm really excited to get a larger audience to talk about this. Like Dan had said, I presented at ISLE this year on library data, and it was an overwhelming amount of people who were really excited to kind of look at data differently. So just to let you know, like, I'm not a mathematician or a statistician at all. I have a degree in nutrition and dietetics, which led me into the education field through science and math advocacy, and then brought me into the library after spending about 7 years in the classroom. And so I have used data to grow my library because I had inherited it from a RIF situation, and it wasn't great for our kids. So just like any other teacher or library director, we want to make sure that we're there for our patrons and for our students. So when I came in, I knew that I had to start leveraging data to try to get people to notice the program, and numbers tell a bigger story than sometimes coming up to somebody and being like, the kids need books. Well, yes, of course they need books. Everybody needs books. But when you start talking about numbers and start kind of proving why your program needs to be better, I got a larger handle and a seat at the table by using the data. So for me, the data is only as good as the story that I can tell with it. So a lot of times when some people will start talking about numbers, your numbers and my numbers might be completely different. And so I need to make sure that the story that I want to tell with my numbers is the story and the outcome in which I'm looking for personally. So from there, I ask myself, when it comes to my library data, like, why am I taking data? Like, why am I counting the number of patrons that come into my library? Why am I talking about or collecting the number of books that students are checking out? Why am I seeing how many classes are using or how many people are using my programs? And then what do I want to do with that? So what am I trying to get? Am I trying to get a remodel? Am I trying to get new furniture? Am I trying to get more books? Am I trying to get recognition? Am I trying to get something approved? And then we ask ourselves how and then when. For today, since this is such a small chunk of a much larger conversation, I did choose to do financial data because we are all coming to, like, for schools, we're coming to the end of our financial season. So we're spending money in our accounts, and it's also the best time for us to start asking for money for next year. So I thought that'd be advantageous for us to do that. And some of the public libraries, you guys are going into summer and getting financials together for all of that. And then also heading into your next school year, especially if you guys are working with your schools together. So at the end of the day, money drives those decisions, especially when you are stuck in a situation in which you don't have as much money. I don't. I barely have enough money to get by. And I'm going to talk about that, and then how I actually use this data to drive those decisions money-wise. If you have questions along the way, feel free to throw those up in the chat as well. I can see them on my side. So some things to think about when I'm talking about data. These are kind of the 4 things that I look at in like a large whole. Dan had said this before, I'm a district librarian, so I take care of 8 physical library spaces. So I have 8 schools underneath my umbrella, 5 elementaries, 2 middles, and a high school. So I have to look at things as a whole, and I'm usually working about 6 months to a year out from my current year. So like I'm already working on things for next year and possibly even the year after that, because I have to, we have to think that far out. So when we're looking at this, one of the things that I look at is added book value. Now I'm going to tell you that these numbers are public knowledge because these are numbers that I took to the board last June to show them information on our libraries. So I showed them added book value. So for me, these numbers are, here's all my schools mixed up accordingly, the number of books that I added to my collection, and then the monetary value that came with those books. As librarians, you guys might be looking at this 1 or 2 ways. I'm going to tell you what story I told to them, and then we're also going to look at this data in another way. I told them, look at how great our program is. Look at how many books we added into our physical collection, and look how much added value that we added on top of our collection together. My collection collectively as a district is worth $865,000. And so this is that added value. This adds up to about $53,000 worth of materials that we added into the schools last year, which is really awesome. However, there's an Easter egg in here. So what the story comes on the outside and in privacy with my own curriculum director and sometimes my principals is you can also tell that there's actually a lot of inequity going on between my buildings. So elementary 2 only had 96 books added, where elementary 1 had 1,200 books added. That's not fair, and that's not equitable access to print edition books inside those buildings. And you can also see that there's a huge disparity between the money that's actually going into those programs. Is that something I verbalized in front of my board? No. Is it right there in front of them? Absolutely. And so it depends on who I'm talking to and what story I'm going to tell during those things. So this is added book value. The other thing is too, is some people, it might not be as prevalent on the public library side as much as school side, but making sure that we are putting monetary values to everything, because I do know some schools that won't put monetary value to things that are donated to them because they didn't pay for it. But I always tell them, like 3 years ago, we had a flood inside of my library and I lost $12,000 worth of books. It was probably more than that, but we didn't have price tags attached to everything, which was our loss and something that I didn't do. So I even tell people, like, if you had somebody donate a Harry Potter to you, even though you got it for free, if somebody loses that, you have to replace that book if you want to, and that means money's coming out. So make sure that we're adding that value into there as well. The other thing we talk about is yearly funding. So grand total down at the bottom, last year for the school year, I had $50,000 brought into my library last year. Now, for a school library program, that is a lot of money. I mean, just a ridiculous amount of money. However, I ended up breaking it up into where that money was coming from. So book fairs, those are the ones that I ran. So those are ones that had my name on it. I set up the book fair. I did the volunteers. I did the money. I was there all week for the book fair. Curriculum, that's the stuff that came from my curriculum director for special programs or large gaps. District, that's our district line item. So our district only paid in $10,000 into the program last year. I had a private donor donate $1,000 and then somebody else donate $100. Instructional, that's the stuff that like my principals give me because I'm begging for money. And then the PTO or Parents Club bought into $26,000 of our funding last year. So as you can see, that's a lot of disparity between where our money and our funding is actually coming from within the district. So again, when presented, $50,000 looks like a lot, but when you break that down on where that money's coming from, it kind of tells this different story. And then this is our lovely pie chart, which always goes really far because it's a pie chart, and you can see that 52% of PTO is gifting the money to the library, but for anything else that's raising money for you, we also understand that that money is not guaranteed. So for example, moving into next school year, I already know that one of our PTOs who was funding our program, a large chunk of it, is actually pulling back on that because they have another project they're going to be working on. So I'm actually losing funding at that school. So PTO, depending on who's running that, is always kind of up in the air and how much they end up donating. The other thing that I look at is CPP. This is cost per pupil. And this is how schools design, it takes school districts, you know, $11,000 to educate a kid every year, but you can actually break that down into how much it's going to cost them with your specific program. So for example, if I take my student population and the amounts that went into each school, and as you can see, again, we're talking about disparities between each of the amount of money that's going into each one of these schools. If I break it down, you can see that cost per pupil is less than $20. And in one of my middle schools, it's $4 a student. I can't buy a book for $4 a student. $2,900 is not covering the needs of 683 students in that middle school. Or even $9 at the high school versus one of the elementary schools that's getting $18. And so again, it's having that larger conversation about the inequity of funding versus how many students are there. And then do you rehash out funding based on the number of students or whatever story you want to tell with there. So that's with total funding, that $50,000. And so what I call that is flex money, because that money is not guaranteed to me at all. It fluctuates. Like if I lose a book fair, if somebody decides not to donate something, if PTO wants to build a playground and not fund the library, if there's no money from the curriculum department or my principals tell me no, I'm based on what the district gives me. So this is an example of, this is actually my budget. So this is my budget per building that we have. So each elementary school and middle school gets $1,000 and the high school gets $3,000, and that's it. So every August I come to school and I know that I can only spend $1,000 and then $3,000 at the high school. That's it. That's all I have. Anything else is gifted to me, and I will praise those who give me the money for the schools. But when you break down cost per pupil, you can see that as a district, we are putting in less than $5 per school. So, and that's not okay, honestly. So it's one of those things where it depends on what story is kind of told. So when I brought this to the board, it was kind of that amazing realization of like, oh, we didn't know. No, you didn't know, because we do bring in a lot of money and you do see the book fairs and you do see donations and you think everything's fine. But when it comes to actual curriculum and patrons and students and what's best for them, that money going in is not equivalent to what needs to be done, which then leads to, you know, junky collections that are outdated. We don't have diverse collections because, you know, whatever reason, we're only buying trendy books because that's what the kids want to read. And we have all these other kind of underlining problems. And a lot of it has to do with that beginning funding. Again, my name is Amy. And these are my contact information if you guys want that, to reach out if you have any other questions for me. I do a podcast that we talk about literature and books and libraries and things like that. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. And that's it. Is there anything else, Dan?
Nope. Okay, I'm gonna take back control from you, Amy. Wonderful. Okay, so Amy, you can stick around to do some Q&A. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, awesome. All right, so at this point, we're going to move into the chat portion of our afternoon. And I want to start by inviting any questions that you might have for Amy. So she's going to answer anything you might want to know about data, or you know, encourage you to talk about some of your own data practices and ask her about those. That's fine. So I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time to type, because I know that these things don't always come so easily. But in the meantime, I just want to talk a little bit about the format. So in that chat box, as soon as we're done with the Q&A, we're going to move into our discussion portion. And that's when I'm going to give you questions that are intended for you to answer. So you can talk about what you do in your own library. And I'm going to put Q1, Q2, and then so when you answer them, please answer with A1, A2, so that we sort of have a way to organize the chat. I mean, we're all librarians, right? That's something we really feel like we need to do. Okay, so we're getting some questions in, and again, we'll do this Q&A portion, and then we'll move on to the text discussion. Okay, so first question is from Tom. Tom asks, Amy, you mentioned the money for books. Am I to assume that supplies also come out of that budget, or is it a separate budget?
No, that is supply budget as well. So namely, years ago, we had a RIF situation, so they ended up slashing everything, which is very common. And what happened is actually in the line item, it only says library supplies. And so a lot of the buildings just assumed that we could only buy the film and the cover and the tape with that. And then when I took over, I started buying books with that because it became ridiculous. So it really is supplies and books. So in general, a lot of people just assume I have $1,000, but that's also to buy the stuff that we need to keep that in order. So especially when we have big donations, it's really hard. So yes, it's all included, Tom.
Great. Jennifer asks, Amy, what program, if any, do you use to create your pie charts and other visuals?
I think that was just Excel, or we're Google School, so I'll use Google Sheets as well when it comes to creating those pie charts and things like that. So you just put them in a chart, in a graph, and then you can just change it over. So I just simplistic, whatever's given to me.
Yeah, and I just want to jump on that too. Is there is a Rails archived webinar on data display, and you can find that on the Rails website. It was done for us by a presenter who does a lot of these for nonprofits, for profits, and other libraries and schools and things like that. Just really easy data points and understanding how to display your data. But Amy, I think you did a wonderful job. It's very clear the point you're trying to make in each of those. So, okay, next question is from Stephanie. And you've touched on this a little bit already, Amy, but other than dollars, what other data points do you collect?
So I'm gonna dive deep into this, into the much larger webinar in a couple weeks, but very simply, so at my elementary schools right now, they're on a fixed schedule. So for my littles, I'm collecting data points on whether or not those books are coming out of book bags. It's a little bit harder data to collect, but I want to know from the kids who are coming every week, whether or not they're pulling the books out of their book bag and reading them, because my program isn't effective if the kids are not reading the books. Like, what's the point? I'm also looking at the number of checkouts per classroom, so I can tell what teacher is making kids check out books versus those who are not. And then asking those teachers questions like, are they getting their books from the public library? Are they coming to books somewhere else? Are they reading them on a Kindle? And what I'm looking for there is data points on whether or not the collection is good enough, whether the teacher is in line with my collection, whether or not there's any help down there. I can usually tell by that data whether or not the teacher is up to date with current literature, by what books that they're suggesting their students, or their level of interest in a library, in a functioning library program. At the middle school, I collect how many kids come to the library on homeroom time and then off time. I also am doing checkouts as well. So I will compare my middle schools to see who's checking out more books at each building. And then from there, I can gear whether or not kids are choosing to come and to continue, because now we're on a flex schedule. And then the other one that I do there is how many classes come in. So how many teachers are bringing their classes to the library for library purposes, because that's going to garner a better, level of literature and things like that if their teachers on. And then at the high school is more fixed. So I'm tracking how many kids are coming in on study hall passes and then choosing to use the library. I do checkouts, not as much because teenagers are fickle and they read elsewhere. But this year I'm actually tracking how many how many original titles are being checked out. So right now we've had over 500 different titles from the high school checked out by our students. So that's really kind of exciting. So a lot of it at the high school is like how many people are using the space, and then during what periods and things like that.
It really does seem like you figured out what are the things you actually want to know, and then figured out what data to collect in order to figure that out.
Yep.
Because
that's my story. I mean, like I have to tell a story, and when I'm caught in the hallway with an administrator and they're asking me how the library is, which they've stopped doing because they don't want to talk about it anymore. But I have to tell them something. And so there's always something and there's usually something behind it. I'm looking for something, like there's an end goal for me, whether it's a redo, more money, a seat at a larger table or something like that. So I'm always looking for reasons.
Awesome. Okay, so keep those questions coming for Amy, but in the meantime, I put in a question for everyone participating. It's Q1, what types of data are you currently collecting in your library? So we want to hear from you. We want to hear if there's anything different that you're doing, if there are new trends that you are looking into, that type of thing. And so please answer with A1. Again, the A1 format just kind of corresponds to the Q1. And this is a chance for you to sort of share what's happening with you. So we definitely want to hear from you. Okay, and also, and just a reminder, please, again, do keep those questions for Amy coming. If you have anything on your mind, you can ask, and I will be sure to submit it to her. Amy, so tell me, how did you come up with all this? I mean, what was your original like goal in collecting all this data and sort of like advocating for yourself?
So I alluded to this before, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we went through a RIF at, we were broke. And so
what's a RIF?
A RIF is Tom, help me out here. What's it stands for? A reduction in full force. Reduction. It's a firing situation for teachers. So
Ooh, okay.
We don't have the money anymore or the need anymore. So then the union will start going through and we'll start taking the last bits of hirees and getting rid of them. Basically, it's a reduction in force. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, reduction in force. And so we had that. So our librarian, we had 2 certified librarians, one at the middle school, one at the high school. We had not had ever certified librarians at the elementary school until I took them over 2 years ago. They were always ran by a para. And our high school librarian retired, so they didn't rehire him. And then the girl that was at the middle schools moved to Georgia. So they made it a district position. And we went a year without a librarian and it was failing. And so when I jumped out of the classroom in the library, I needed to come up. The libraries were very old. They needed remodeling. And so what my first year is I just looked and I just listened. And then I started gathering like, how many kids are actually coming in here? Like if the first year that I took over the high school library, we had 8 books checked out from the library the year before. And I was like, well, challenge accepted. So I started tracking how many books were checked out from the library. And then I started checking how many classes are using the library computer lab versus the other ones. How many kids are coming into the library. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed into I needed something. So I needed to prove that I needed it. And numbers were my magical formula where I am.
Awesome. Okay, so we do have a response to the first discussion question. Jennifer says things that she collects in her library, people coming through the door, books checked out, and what categories such as adult fiction, juvenile nonfiction, games, DVDs, people participating in active programs, people participating in active and passive programs. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Great. Also got one from Jolene. Circulation stats by item type. ILLs, items added, services provided, program stats, door counts, computer use. Thank you, Jolene. Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. Tom says, since I'm always pushing the envelope and asking for more money for databases at our high school, I keep data on sessions, searches, and retrievals for our database. I keep track of circulation, but I don't usually report that since I don't have a concern for that budget. Database is gold at our school, and that is the story I push. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I guess it really depends on what is important to you in your library. That's a great way to do it. Oh, wow, we just had another one come in. Mary says, I collect data on the number of classes coming into the library for direct class instruction with me, number of book talks, number of students not with a class, using the library each period, circulation stats, top checkouts. Great, awesome. Thank you for all that. Keep them coming. In the meantime, I'm going to put in question 2. So this is more of a methods questions. How do you collect and organize your data? And we had that question for Amy, more or less. Amy, you said you mostly use Google products, Google Sheets, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I use a lot of it through Google Form. So like the kids, every time they come to the high school, they sign in on a Google form. Honestly, like we don't have any money, so that's the cheapest way to us do it. I know I've seen other librarians that have like the really fancy check-in systems. So they use that, but otherwise a Google form in all three of my secondary libraries. And then the littles don't, because they have to come in every week. So it's usually just through my Google products and things like that. And then if I send out surveys, which are sometimes not as great as I want them to be.
No, I mean, everybody has problems with surveys, right? So do you have like a master document that has all of the data and information on it, or is it?
Yes, yeah, I have one for each school year, and then I archive that. And then I'll refer to it. So right now I have historical data as well, which we'll talk a big game when I put those next. So like right now I had my paras in each one of my buildings track how many classes are coming in to the middle schools, and I can track by teacher. And then the other thing I'm doing is, so I can track by teacher. So then I have conversations with my principals about like, hey, this teacher has been coming in like year one, she was in there 26 times, and now like we've like fell off. Like, has the curriculum changed? Is she having problems with the space and things like that? And then and then I keep those, I just archive them in my Google Drive. It's not as orderly as I want it to be, but it's all there.
No, but nobody's Google Drive is as orderly as they
No,
would,
not at all. I don't know how
especially librarians.
yeah, it's nuts.
Okay. All right. So some great answers. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this. We've got Tom, who says he collects and organizes information or data through Google Sheets and Forms. He also says surveys never work the way I expect. Yeah, it is. It's tough, and there ought to be a survey writing webinar or online roundtable somewhere out there, because we've all done one that just hasn't really panned out. Stephanie says teaching and space requests now go through Google Forms. Used to use PE designs to track scheduling and collect data concerning space and library usage. Used Destiny to track circulation and collection stats. Use Google Sheets to track attendance / drop-in students. Thank you, Stephanie. Jennifer says, A2, most of my data is collected via hash marks on a piece of paper. All right, the old manual way, like that. Circ stats are tracked via the ILS. I keep track of it all on Google Sheets, spreadsheets, and more spreadsheets. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. I also like the hash marks too. I mean, I'm that person with the Post-its as well. They're stuck to me.
Whatever works, whatever works. Mary says, my kids scan in twice each time they enter the library. One, our student management system, and two, my Excel sheet with formulas that populate student name and time of arrival. Whoa, okay. Students scan their ID, use Google Calendar to track classroom visits, color coded by reason for visit. Wow. Okay, Mary's got quite a system there. That's pretty cool. Wow. Okay. So Mary, I got to ask a follow-up question here, Mary. Your Excel sheet populates with student name and time of arrival?
Mine used to do that. You can, and Mary, absolutely 100%. I want to know like what you did. But mine used to, except my only problem is I have parapros that like when we had students coming in and leaving the building, like we'd have to put their name on the list, and it became super complicated for my parapros to keep up with that. So I had to ditch that, but I would love that. And then the Google Calendar. I use a Google Sheet to do my my computer labs and check-in and checkouts for the libraries too.
Not a Google Calendar?
No, because not everybody in my district likes a Google Calendar. Like they do for their own personal stuff, but when we share it, it just doesn't seem to go over well with our staff. So I just have a Google Sheet, and then inside it looks like a fake calendar in the cells, and then they just go in and fill it out. And again, because I have parapros, it was easier for them to just stay with a program that everybody kind of understood.
Sure. Yeah. I actually, that reminds me of a school librarian tell me that, she had changed everything from, she was putting together like Microsoft Word reports for her like administrators like once a month based on like what was happening in the library, and there was this change in administration and suddenly everything had to be in Excel, and it's sort of adjusting, and I guess that just goes to show you that you need to sort of put it in a format that's going to be used by
Yeah,
other people.
totally.
Which is a good segue for question 3. So the question is, as soon as I submit here, how do you share your data with others? In what ways does your, it should be, in what ways does your data tell a story? But if you have questions, if you have answers to question 2, keep them coming in, or questions for Amy. I guess, Amy, you sort of, I mean, you've touched on this widely, but, you know, uh, where else besides you've talked about sharing this data with like the school board and your
Right.
administrators, is there any other place that you
Yeah,
this
I will share it with my teachers on like a need to know basis if I'm trying to do something with it. I am invited to a monthly admin meeting with all my principals. I finally got a seat at that table this year, so I go in there every month, and I'm dead set on sharing data for something. So last month, nope, not last month because I wasn't invited last month. January, I went through all my schools. We have Destiny, so it's easy to pull the reports. I went through and I told them how much money we had lost in books that had not returned. So in my Destiny, it's set up that if a book hasn't been returned in 30 days, the computer will mark it lost. Like, even though we know it's like underneath your bed or in your car, it's fine. It's going to show up, but it's not there. So I took all that money, and so I was able to show the principals that we had lost, I think it was like $3,000 district wide on books that had not made it back into the library. And that was really concerning to them, as it should be. But I do it there, and then to my teachers' boards in the community. I always keep it tucked away, so whenever I need it, I have it, because you never know when you get in a conversation that you need stats and things like that. So, I mean, I don't blast them on social media because I also don't want people asking too many questions.
yeah, I can see that one as well. Sure. Okay, I want to go back to the question 2. Marietta, good response. She says, yes, I use 2 different formulas, one for the name and one for arrival time. I have to have a sheet in the workbook with all students' names and IDs. I update this regularly. This is the circular reference that allows the student to be recognized. Okay, thank you, Mary. That's great. I appreciate the update on that. Question 3 again was, how do you share your data with others? In what ways does your data tell a story? And Stephanie said, we create an infographic printed postcard size and attached a branded pen to it. Then we give it to all teachers and admin at the beginning of the year. Wow. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Awesome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for
I
sharing
like
that.
that. That's great.
That's really cool. Jennifer says, my board gets a report every month with bar graphs that show the various circulations categories compared to the past 5 years of data, excuse me, in that month. There are also bar graphs showing people through the door in each hour to make sure we've got the hours that work for patrons, and in each day. Each of those attendance graphs also compares to that month in the previous 5 years. I also tell them how many books were added and removed from the collection in the past month. Thank you, Jennifer. Tom says, I share with the board once a year and generally filibuster for a good 20
Yes,
minutes.
absolutely.
I've heard the joke is to bring a sandwich to the October meeting. I also share some data at department chair meetings. Like Amy, admin doesn't stop to talk to me in the hallways. They have heard it enough. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I like to hear. How can people get tired of that? I don't know.
I think the one thing about that too, and Tom and I are actually really close to one another, like location wise. And so we talk about it a lot, just how different priorities of different admins. So like, I don't know, it gets concerning. Like, we'll get a new admin in and I'll start talking about library. And if they didn't have a functioning library at their last school, they don't actually understand what we do and what we can do. And so sometimes it goes over their head. So it's interesting to hear other librarians where you have to like bring it down 3 or 4 steps, and it's like small baby steps. But yeah, it's interesting to see how we're all very different, and yet a lot of times it's all the same data.
Yeah, and I'm sure that sometimes that's frustrating to have to deal with administrative, like just again those sort of shifting expectations of administrators. I think we can all sort of identify with that. Okay, so I'm putting in question 4 So we've asked you about what you do. We've asked you about how you do, and then how you share what you do. And now we've sort of asked, what would you like to do? What are you hoping to do that's different from what you're currently doing? So question 4 says, what would you like to change about how you use or display data? What types of data would you like to collect that you are not already collecting? So what are your expectations? And I guess this is a good question for you, Amy. Maybe this is something that you've thought about. How would you like to change things or add or subtract in
So
the future?
right now I am campaigning for another certified librarian. Like I said, I am the only certified in my district. I have a team of 8 parapros who are actually in the buildings, and then I float. I'm actually in the classroom as well. So what I'm trying to do is collect data on how a librarian is a missing piece to the puzzle when it comes to curriculum and a long-term goal of like raising scores and stuff. Like, we know the research that says that school librarians are important and public librarians and all that other good stuff. However, a lot of times it's proving that. So for example, yesterday I went through and I pulled checkout statistics for all my students at the middle schools, and I can actually go in to see who and who has not checked out books from the library. And then I want to cross-reference those with AR and whatever other data you have in your school. And then what happens is I will go in and I'll start asking questions on like why Johnny has only checked out 1 book. Well, sometimes Johnny goes to the public library twice a week with his parents. Absolutely 100% fine. Some of it, what we have found is we have students that are transferring into the district who don't know how to use a library because they didn't come from a place with a library, or they're too scared to come to the library, or they didn't know that they could, or there's a reading problem or something like that. So what I'm trying to do is collect evidence that goes beyond my library walls and now into the classroom to, again, get another seat at the table to try to prove, like, in order for our teachers to have better writing curriculum, they don't know what books to pull for their students to have them read before they write opinion texts, or they can't write mentor texts if they don't know what mentor books we have in the library, and then they're all running out and spending their own money and they're actually curating a terrible collection in their classroom, or it's the classroom that Scholastic built or something like that. So it's trying to get my feet in at another angle, and a lot of it has to do with curriculum and then long-term goals. That's a lot.
Yeah, no, I like that. The long-term goals thing, again, going back to what do you want to do with this data? It sounds like that's a frequent thing. Okay, some great answers here. Jennifer, I feel like my data is very dry and boring. It works for the board who basically glances over it, but I'd like to be able to show something patrons who might be interested in our library, particularly patrons who are thinking about making a donation.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love more interesting presentation or graphics and something that I can show patrons that will make sense to them. Yeah. Great.
Agree.
Stephanie says, I'd like to get a voice at higher levels. Right now, we're very supported by our principal, but she's retiring. So I'd like our story to be available and existing before we get a new admin. Oh, shout out, Stephanie. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'd like to get instructional data we rarely assess, and so I'm not sure how to show effectiveness in teaching. Great question. Tom says, I typically share stories to tell the story of the library. This has been helpful to look at data to support the stories. Yeah, great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy, any advice on how to show effectiveness in teaching?
My God, it's like a whole webinar. No, I would say, like, my best effort when it comes to effectiveness in teaching is my testimonials from my teachers. It's my teachers telling other people, like, yes, like Amy came in and Amy can do it. So it's a lot of it's off of recommendations from those. Like, I took over the elementary schools last year, and I wasn't invited to do so. It was something that came from above me, from the district level, like, Amy is now coming to do your libraries. And so, like, that staff in some of the buildings, I'm actually like, I'm welcomed, like, they know me, but I'm not actually part of their core staff. So a lot of times I will have to, like, come in and present myself, and then it's through word of the fact that, yes, I was a teacher and I do know what I'm doing. So that's what's worked best for me.
Tom sort of echoes that, and I think Tom is responding to Stephanie's request for ways to show effectiveness in teaching. Tom says testimonials from teachers, but also, do you do SLOs, student learning objectives? And I'm not familiar with that, but But I think that's,
Yes.
yeah, that is a good
So
suggestion.
as the student learning objectives, they're part of our evaluations. So depending on what your school does, so you have to pick a goal, like a SMART goal, and then you have to like pre-test and then post-test and then show growth. My school district does not do SLOs because collectively we take their STAR tests. It was a thing. And so we don't do SLOs, but that's another thing too, because that's going to show effectiveness because you're showing growth in your students. So that's really good. Tom, I'd like to see your SLOs, by the way. And then Stephanie's question, Dan, I'm just going to
Yeah,
bypass.
go it.
Sorry.
Do it.
Yeah, I actually am really mindful about that. And remember, I taught in the district before I took over the library, so I actually had some really great connections beforehand. But yes, I mean, I'm strategic about who I go to. And a lot of times I will hit the new teachers as well. So I'll go in and make sure that they're aware of our databases and what we can do, and then make friends with them, because a lot of times I can help in other ways. But yes, I mean, it's very strategic. And if people are talking poorly about me, they're not doing it to my face and I don't ever hear about it. So, I mean, that's good, right? Yes.
Who would possibly talk poorly about you, Amy?
I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine.
No. Okay, so we have roughly 15 minutes left, but I am going to make this the last question because I don't have any more questions. So does anyone have any suggestions or any other advice about using data or collecting data for students? So this is kind of a catch-all question. Anything that you want to ask or you want to promote, this is kind of a good way to do that. Or other ways to collect data. But in the meantime, we still have a few minutes left, and if you want to ask Amy any questions, you can. So again, this is just kind of a way to get you to think about using your data and ways to collect and display. This conversation is very much, I think, an entry point. So if you are more interested, again, I highly encourage you to sign up for Amy's webinar on the 17th. Again, I've mentioned a few opportunities to access archived webinars through Rails. This is definitely not the only thing that we're doing on data in terms of Rails. There's a lot more out there. But if anyone else has any suggestions or ways to better collect data, please let us know. Amy, do you have any like closing thoughts? Anything that that was brought up in this online roundtable that you want to mention, or that you think was particularly, and any ideas from other libraries you think is particularly interesting or useful for your own library?
Yeah, I think the stuff that Tom was saying about the databases, so I get data from my databases at school, but I don't leverage them quite as strong as he does. So I think that is something else. We just got like World Book this year and stuff, and that data is pretty impressive, but that's not something that I really shared out about. That is part of my position. So that, and then some of the other ways that you guys are displaying with, like, put it on a postcard and pens and things like that. I think that's all really strong information. And like I said, in the next webinar, I go into how I collect student data and a little bit more about why and how I do that, and then ways to get started too. So if there's other people on the docket who have no idea where to start, I kind of share tips on how I do those.
Yeah, and actually, I want to emphasize. I want to go back and agree with you on that. Stephanie's idea of creating an infographic and then printing it on a postcard. That's such a cool idea. I've never heard that before. And just an example of libraries out there doing amazing things, and I think there's a lot of that happening. A lot of, I think a lot of libraries bring their own unique approach. What works for one library might not work for the other library. So kudos to you all. Okay, last thing I just want to mention, Tom says, I do interview students to get their stories. Oh, that's an interesting idea. I learn what had an impact and where I missed the target.
Agreed.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of a cool idea. Tom, do you print those anywhere? Do you publish that information, or is that just for your own usage? Curious.
Yeah, why he types that. I know one of the things the cool thing about my position is my last class that I actually taught are seniors this year. So I will have long conversations with them about like their reading habits through the years and like where they fell off reading, and then kind of gear other conversations with teachers saying like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but AR wasn't greatly effective. And so now they're not reading in high school, and I'm actually trying to get the kids to continue leisure reading. So, but I do like that, Your own building. I do that too.
Tom, yeah, Tom says,
Your
yeah, I
own
use it.
evaluations. That's a good idea, Tom.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing, Tom. That's great. I also share it to the board. Okay, well, not seeing any other advice or suggestions, so I'm going to bring us to a close here. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much for presenting your knowledge here. I'm excited. This was a nice little preview for what's going to happen on the 17th.
Yes, thank you.
And just a note to everyone, this session will be archived, and it's going to be available from the Rails website and from our YouTube page, and so you'll be able to go back and access it there. We have a couple online roundtables coming up, so please be sure to sign up for those. And thank you so much for all your participation today, everyone who brought ideas and came with some good suggestions. That is always appreciated. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.